we've never had the chance to meet, my name's Jonathan. My wife Natasha and I are the lead pastors at EC. Grateful for these moments we get to spend together. And you know, on Sundays, we like to journey together. I always feel like when we step into the room together, God's got the opportunity to collectively take us in the same direction. So it's important that you're here. It wouldn't be the same without you. And the direction that we've been headed and the study that we've been in since the beginning of the year comes from the book of Judges in the Old Testament. Judges chapter 21, verse 25 is a verse that we're getting quite familiar with. It says this: in those days, Israel had no king. Just a moment of clarification and understanding. Old Testament Israel is New Testament Christians, okay? So when it says, this is how we relate to the text. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. You always got to look for, hey, where am I and where's Jesus in the story? And in this one, Jesus is the king. And the truth of it is that we, like the Israelites, struggle because we want to do what's right in our eyes and we don't actually like to be led. So we've been looking at this book of Judges. We started out the first several weeks, we called it Kingless. We're looking at breaking some of the toxic cycles and habits that we have. And Judges serves like a mirror. I don't know how much time you spend in front of the mirror. It's probably good that mirrors don't have clocks on them or countdown timers. You're not tracking. I don't want to know how much time I spend in front of the mirror. I'll be honest, it's for the end product, I'm probably spending too much time. I'm probably not getting the work done that I should be getting done for the time that I spend in front of it. But this is what I know. I know that I prefer mirrors in dark rooms. I don't know how you feel. I like a mirror in a dimly lit washroom. My washroom's got options. So you've got there's 3 lights in my washroom. And so I can turn the light on over the tub. There's a light that goes over the shower. And there's this general all-purpose light. My favorite time to look in the mirror is when I only turn on the shower light because it's far away from my sink. And when I turn on the shower light and it's just me, this was this morning. This is real time, everybody. I'm looking in the mirror. I got the shower light on. It's 10 feet away. I'm shadowy and I looked good. I was looking in the mirror like, whew. You better work out. You know, you got look at that jaw structure. Look at that. And I needed the encouragement of my dark mirror because this week I spent a couple nights in a hotel and the hotel didn't have the same lighting flexibility as my bathroom. So in the hotel, when I went into the hotel washroom, you don't get options. I can't pick the light that makes me look good and the light that shows everything. It was so bright in the washroom. I came into it. You know, Tuesday morning, I woke up, I looked in my mirror. I felt good. I went into the trip with a bit of confidence. Wednesday morning, I get up. Myself and Zara, we were in Minneapolis. I get up Wednesday morning. I turn on the lights in the washroom to prepare for my day. And it's so bright. It's like being at the doctor's for a physical. I could see everything. There was not a shadow anywhere. I was like, oh, God, this is not a good way to start the day. Because there's something about it just exposes more. And Judges, if you don't really get into it, if you don't really expose light on it, can make you feel a little bit self-righteous. Man, these people have a lot of issues. Glad I'm not like these people. But as we've exposed light on the book of Judges, it's like a mirror in a bright room. It starts to reveal things that you tried to forget. It starts to reveal things about human nature and our own character and our own flaws. You start to see things and patterns of behavior that you maybe don't want to readily acknowledge, but if you really turn the lights up, they're there, and there's kind of nothing you can do about it. That's just me. And Judges shows us these patterns. Judges shows us that God has been good to each one of us, but we all have a tendency to wander and take him for granted. And as we take him for granted, we start doing whatever we want, whatever seems right in our own eyes. And we reject him and it ends poorly, but God is always listening and God never leaves us. And so no matter how long or how far we've gone, God always offers a way out, which is the silver lining in the text. There's always a way out. As bad as it gets, there's always a way out. That's why you and I are in the room today. And no matter how tempted, how tormented, how traumatized, how disobedient, how sinful, how much we've wandered, God always gives a way out. No matter where we find ourselves, God extends a hand and says, hey, I'm listening and I didn't leave. I'm right here. And so Judges has been this overarching study, and then we've zoomed in at the life of Samson and Fatal Attraction. It's this up close and personal look at the things that in a very real way, ground level, draw us away from our relationship with God. We talked about Samson. He's got this miraculous birth, and he's ripping lions apart with his bare hands. He's got anger issues. He's his own worst enemy. He's so easily distracted by the honey traps that the devil would put out for him, and he can't get out of his own way. Yet he still grabs a jawbone and is full of the Holy Spirit and supernatural strength and takes down 1,000 enemies at one time. He's this complex, conflicted character. Today, I want to conclude our study on Samson with probably his most famous relationship and his most famous moment. I want to go to Judges chapter 16, verse 18 is where we're going to start, and I want to just give a little bit of context on what's going on. It says, when Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, come back once more, he has told me everything. So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. After putting him to sleep on their lap, which, don't judge him. Last night we're watching the third period of the hockey game at my house, and I'm like, hey, would it be okay if I just put my head in your lap and you just touch my head for a minute? Like, I don't mind being a guy that likes when his wife touches his just run your fingers. She's although she doesn't like touching my head after a haircut. She's like, you feel like a skinless cat, but that's fine. Doesn't matter. That's rude. Okay, where were we? We're verse 19. We can put verse 19 back up there. She called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza, binding him with bronze shackles. They set him to grinding grain in the prison. Samson finds himself blind, bound, and burnt out. Blind, bound, burnt out. He's treading grain. He's grinding grain. Blind, bound, and burnt out. When I was a kid, when I thought of the story of Samson, when I would hear the story of Samson, I would read the story of Samson, I always thought of it as this triumphant story. I didn't realize it was a tragedy. I thought the story of Samson was a story of conquest and victory. I would always imagine Samson with his muscles. He'd be like The Rock, or not when I was a kid. When I was a kid, he's like Hulk Hogan or like prime Arnold Schwarzenegger, just muscles on muscles, a picture of strength and pure power. And it's interesting to me that this strength of pure power ends up blind, bound, and burnt out. That this man who's known, you don't even have to be going to church for long or have been part of the deal. You've probably heard of Samson even before you showed up here. He's famous. He's a strong man. And what's crazy is at the end of chapter 15, it actually says in 15 verse 20 that Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. That sounds successful. That sounds like he got the job done. In fact, every other judge that we've studied, that's how their story ends. They have their moment, they have their conquest, the Lord helps them, they overcome adversity, and then it just says, hey, this is how long they led for, and you're like, great way to end the story. Samson's doing well after bad decisions and battles and poor relationships and selfish ambition. After doing whatever seemed right in his own eyes, he got things together. He had success. He was finally the leader Israel needed. For 20 years, he was the leader that God had anointed, the one that God intended for 20 years, which makes it so confusing that Samson, after success, would end up blind, bound, and burnt out. To get context on how we got there, we need to start at chapter 16, verse 1. When it says, one day, Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole story here. I'm not going to give you all the details of this encounter. He spends an evening with a prostitute, Now, while he's in with the prostitute, the Philistines gather, and their plan is to ambush him in the morning when he leaves and take his life. Samson, knowing their plan, gets up in the middle of the night, makes the getaway, but classic Samson can't just get away. He's got to make a point. He's got to prove a point. So the Bible tells us that he rips the doors off the city gates, puts them on his shoulder, and walks them what is the equivalent of 60 kilometers. And just so we have an understanding of what supernatural strength looks like, I checked 6 different historical biblical commentaries to try and get a sense for how much these doors weighed. And it puts them somewhere between 5,000 and 5,300 pounds. And so Samson, and all of his supernatural strength, throws these up on his shoulder and takes them 60 kilometers uphill. But he actually did it. Not like your grandparents who walked uphill to school in the snow both directions. Samson actually takes these doors, and he does so almost as like flipping the bird to the Philistines. He's taunting them. He takes what they think would give them safety and security. He rips it up and proves a point. I don't need to get into all of that. What I want to just mention is that it said one day. It was just one day. It was one day. And you got to look out for one day. I know it might sound insignificant, but can I encourage you, have to be on the lookout for one day. Because a lot of crazy things happen one day. 20 years of success, and then one day, no tragedy, no attack, no trauma, no disruption in his life, no defeat, just one day, and the Bible says he saw a prostitute. One day of thriving in his career, his divine assignment. We can only assume that his relationships were intact. One day, and he saw, and that is Samson's primary issue. Because when you read a story as an adult, you now get a little bit of perspective. When you've got a little bit of maturity, it hits a little bit different. And now as we read it, we're not as impressed with his power. We're kind of depressed by the lack of potential, or the lack of living up to his potential, the wasted potential. He's a man who had every advantage. Anointed from birth, supernatural power, and you look at his life as a man, how could he waste all of that? And the truth is that today we also have every advantage. We also have God living on the inside of us. We also see ourselves in the story. Anytime we don't live up to the potential and the power and the purpose and the anointing of God, you got to ask yourself the question, man, that's depressing that I haven't lived up to what God created me for. And the problem for Samson was that there seemed to be no match for his strength. There seemed to be no comp for his power. There seemed to be nobody that could stand up to him in a physical battle. No match for his strength except for his sight. The one thing Samson couldn't defeat. The one little problem he never managed to get over. The one thing he couldn't ever wrestle into submission was his tendency to see things that look good but weren't from God, yet still take them for himself. And it is a tale as old as time. It's the tale of the Garden of Eden, that Eve saw something that looked good, and her and Adam took it for themselves, even though it wasn't from God. Given every chance to succeed, Adam and Eve still gave into sinful nature that wanted the one thing God said, don't have that. You can have everything else, just not that. And given every chance to succeed, our sinful nature still takes over at times, and we will go for the thing that looks good or feels good, but might not be from God, and we grab hold of it to our destruction. Samson, in a world where everybody is doing what's right in their own eyes, he is the poster boy, he is the case study, he is the example. His eyes were his problem. He saw. Anybody remember, I'll help you remember here, or teach you for the first time, like an old kids' church song. I do so knowing full well that every time I remember these old kids' church songs and I sing them to myself, especially if I sing them in front of you, it feels a little cultish. Okay, that's the preface. But this might jog some memory for some of you. It's Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you... Okay, if you know it, let's just embrace the cult feel. Let's sing it all together. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Come on, Southwest. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, no, whoa. Yes, let's work in the clap. We're going to start from the beginning. We're going to work in the clap, okay? So it's be careful, little eyes, what you see. Clap, clap. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Clap, clap. Okay, let's try that. We'll take it from the top. Here we go. 1, 2. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above. No more claps. Looking down in love. Oh, be careful, except for here, what you see. Okay, beautiful. Well done. Thank you. Didn't that feel good? Yeah, for some of you, you're like, that brought me back. For some of you, you're like, I don't know if I'm coming back ever. It's fine. Please do. We don't sing those songs every week. I remember singing that song, and the pressure of the Father up above looking down was a lot. Like, he's watching everything. Like, is there ever a moment when he's not watching? And I didn't fully understand what it meant, but it does say the Father up above is looking down in love. Like, that song was written for Samson because he had a way of seeing things and getting distracted. He was not careful, little eyes, what you see. But know this, every time Samson looked, saw, and took something that wasn't from God, God wasn't watching like a cosmic, frustrated, angry, upset God. He was watching like a loving father who's like, no, Samson, not again. Dude, we've been down this road with the Philistine women. Why? Stop. You know this doesn't end well for you. That's God's disposition towards you. It's not, well, I'm watching to judge you. He's watching because he loves you. And every time we step outside of his will and do whatever, his heart breaks for his children who are living below their potential and stepping into unnecessary pain and chaos when he has good things for you. And Samson finds himself, cannot take his eyes off the Philistine women, and because he can't keep his eyes off him, he forgot the second verse, which is, be careful, little hands, what you touch. And he touched the Philistine women, and he got into a world of trouble. And because he never learned how to guard his eyes, he ends up blind, bound, and burnt out. Blind. You got no vision. You can't see beyond the moment. You can't imagine a future. You can't see around the current situation. You can't see a way out of the current relationship. You can't see an end to the current pain. No vision. And he's bound. He's stuck. He's trapped. Nothing changing. No flexibility. No freedom. And he's grinding grain, which would be have him bound up to this press. And he would be walking in circles all day, every day, no vision, bound up, burning out, exhausting himself, moving a lot but never going forward, expending a lot of energy but never making progress, taking a lot of steps. He's got his 10,000 steps every day, but he's not going anywhere. And there are people in the room today, and that feels like where you're at right now. And you never anticipated that one day you'd be here, struggling to have excitement and hope for your future, struggling to feel like you're not stuck and trapped, struggling because you're like, I'm working hard, I'm exhausting myself, I feel like I'm putting in the reps, but I'm not moving forward. How did Samson end up here? Well, Samson's coming out of a season of success, 20 years as a judge, and success will make you compromise or lower your safeguards. Success lies to you. Success lies to you and tells you, I got here on my own. Success lies and says, I got here without God. Success lies and says, I can do whatever I want. Remember, Samson's life had safeguards. He had a Nazirite vow placed on him when he was a young child, or even before he was born, which meant no alcohol, no dead things, no haircuts. It was a safeguard that the Israelites were also supposed to avoid falling in love with Philistines. And that wasn't about race. It was simply about making sure they did not love an ungodly culture. So there were safeguards in Samson's life, safety checks, accountability, things that he had that out of a season of success, He thought in his arrogance, I don't need these safeguards. I'm fine without them. So if I see the girl, I can have the girl. I like safeguards. I'm now a big fan of safety checks. When Zara and I were getting ready to fly to Minneapolis on Tuesday, our flight, we got on the plane, we're set in, she's got her blanket, her teddy bear, her headphones on. She's a couple episodes deep into whatever it is she's watching. And the pilot comes on the plane, and he says, during the safety inspection, we found a problem with one of our flaps. Just give us a few minutes here. Maintenance is coming out. We're going to take care of the issue, and we'll be on our way. And I thought, you know what? Please do take care of that flap. I'm thankful that you found the broken flap. I'm sure you could fly with one flap. I don't want to be in the plane when you try to fly with one flap. So it took a little bit of time. We waited. The maintenance crew, I don't fully know what they were doing. Apparently fixing a flap is a pretty big deal. But they eventually fixed the flap. And we were delayed, but I'm telling you, I'd much rather be in the air with two good flaps than have a broken flap. So I was thankful for the safeguards and the standards that the airline had to find an issue and say, you really shouldn't move forward unless we resolve and fix this issue. Thank God for the safeguard. Now, it was actually a pretty crazy day because we're flying into Minnesota, and there happened to be a blizzard on Wednesday. And I didn't know until we landed and got in our Uber, and our Uber driver was like, man, all the other flights were canceled. It's so crazy that you didn't get rerouted. But they decided to land us in a snowstorm because everyone trusts aviation right now. So we're like coming in a snowstorm, and I can tell Zars is a little nervous. So, I'm just making her feel good, and we're just watching the shows. And I'm watching as every person who spends too much time on Facebook is freaking out. You can tell the people who spend too much time on Facebook because they're like looking around. They're checking for their gas mask. They're like, maybe this should come down because it's a little bit rocky. And then the plane lands, and it lands on the snow, and it kind of does this. You settle in, you're like, whew, all right, we're good. And then it just goes, starts to slide a little bit. I'm like, that's cool. I used to drift when I was 16 in my dad's car. That's fun. And then it comes to a stop, and we're like, hey, we're stopped. And within a minute, the plane is surrounded by emergency vehicles. There's fire trucks and lights going, and there's people running. And the pilot comes on, and I said to Zara, we're going to die. Honey, do you know Jesus? This plane's about to flip. No, I'm not a terrible father. I did not say that to her. But the pilot comes on, and he said, hey, we've got safety crews out. They're inspecting the plane. They're making sure there's not any issues. And, there was some issue. They didn't tell us what it was because you don't need multiple fire trucks if there's no issue. But I was grateful for that. We spent almost an hour on the tarmac. We didn't get off the plane until after midnight. I'm so grateful for the safety checks that said, hey, we're going to send everybody out. It's going to take a bit of time, but we're going to make sure there's no danger. We're going to make sure y'all are okay before we try and get you to the gate. Turns out it wasn't great. Our plane could not get to the gate. We had to get towed, so that was cool. But we made it there safely, and I'm so grateful for the safety check. And you got to be grateful and intentional about having safeguards in your life that will get you to where God's called you safely. The Bible has safeguards. It is not a controlling, overlording Heavenly Father. It is a good God who loves you and just wants you to get there safely. And listen, there are far too many stories of when we were married 20 years and then one day we just kind of fell out of love. Life was going well and business was thriving, and then one day, it's hard to decide or define when it really changed for me. All I know is that one day my heart started to shift, or one day it became difficult for me to worship, or one day I didn't really feel like praying anymore, or one day I just drifted from my faith, or one day I started to think different, or one day I saw how somebody else was living and thought, man, I wish that was me. Or one day I saw that other person and I thought, hey, I wonder what life would be like if one day, can I tell you, it never happens on just one day. But you will wake up one day after a season of drift and be like, man, I never thought I'd be here one day. Success gets you to lower your safeguards. You might say, well, I'm not successful. This isn't an issue for me. You know what's funny, though, is it doesn't take much for us to feel successful, does it? I know there's a lot of people in here, you crushed a diet for Monday. Don't lie to me. You know, you reward yourself on Tuesday because you ate clean on Monday. Man, I did so good today. I need a treat on Tuesday. Yesterday, we haven't been eating, when I say we, I mean me and Natasha, for the most part, have not been eating sugar, okay? I know you can't tell. It takes time to see results. Give us time. We've not been eating. You can tell if she's beautiful anyways. You won't be able to tell if she changes because she can't get any better. But, whew, dodged a bullet. Yesterday, we were getting some groceries, and I saw like the 37-kilogram bag of mini eggs. It was on sale, it was a good price. And I thought, Lord, my kids deserve this. I put it on the counter, and I watched. They're like, Dad, can you open it? I was like, if I open it, I'm going to smell it. But then I opened it, and I just stayed there. And I watched them walk past the bag and reach in. And I walk past the bag and reach in. And I started thinking, I've been pretty good. Haven't had sugar in a while. I feel like I've earned one. I might have earned a few. And then Natasha looks at me, and we're talking about it. We're planning to sin. She's like, maybe after the kids go to bed. We don't want the kids to think we're weak in our convictions. You're like, no, we do not. She actually starts to rationalize it like Delilah. She said, no, this really happened. I know sometimes you think there's no way. Yes way. She says, well, how much is a serving? I'm like, 43 grams. How many eggs is that? 17 eggs. She's like, well, is it that bad if we have one serving? I'm like, are you serious right now? The kids go to bed. I'm like, hey, you want to head downstairs? That's romance for us. You want to go eat chocolate together while the kids are asleep? And then my friend Luke texted me. He said, Pastor, see, we're fasting together. He said, Pastor, we're not eating sugar. It's our thing. He said, I'm having a hard day today because I really want to eat sugar. And I was like, darn you, Luke. Really? And I was like, man, do I go have a mini egg and just pretend I didn't get Luke's text? Or do I write him back something encouraging and tell him, man, I'm struggling too. We're in it together. Thankful to report, I touched them. I'll be honest, I touched them. There was a point in the day I had a handful of mini eggs. And I put them back in. And Tasha's like, did you just have a handful and put them back in? It's like, yeah, I did. The devil's not going to get me, though. You know how it is. You have like just a moment of success and you're like, I'm good. I can lower the safeguards. I'm fine. And we treat God like a fad diet. Man, I had a great Sunday in church, so I can go out tonight with that person that I know is bad for me, bad for my calling, bad for my identity, bad for my purity, but it's all good. I had a great day in church. Man, I really connected with God today so I can let that conviction go. I can drop the safeguard and we rationalize our sin. It's like, well, this is my one vice. Everybody gets one vice. I've been so good for so long. This is my one thing. Man, I'm a good guy. I don't do anything else bad. I stay pretty straight and narrow. Well, what I do is nobody else's business anyways. And what I do is not going to hurt anybody else anyways. And what I do, nobody needs to find out about anyways. And I can do what I want, when I want. I don't care what other people think. I kind of deserve this. And you lower the safeguard. You got to make some decisions. You got to make some pre-decisions. You got to determine. See, safeguards are always in place before you need them. And you got to have some safeguards in place to protect you before you need the safeguard. You got to have boundaries. You got to have safeguards. You have to decide now what you're going to say no to. You got to have some no's. I think not enough people have a no. So you can say yes to Jesus, but if you say yes to everything else, you haven't really said yes to Jesus. Samson wants to say yes to supernatural strength. He also wants to say yes to a prostitute. You can't have it all. You got to have a yes in your heart, but you need some no's to back it up. When we got married, I said yes to Natasha, and at the same time as I said yes to her, I said I will say no to every other woman who ever exists on the face of the planet for as long as I live, because my yes is only as good as my no. If I said yes to her, but then said yes to every other girl, my yes to her doesn't carry any weight. You got to have some boundaries. You got to have some no's. Married people, let me make this a married sermon for about 3.5 minutes. If you're married, you do not need a friend of the opposite sex. If that's her calling, hang up. That's the Lord right there. Phone just went. Hey, baby, you still in church? Get away from me. You don't need a friend of the opposite sex. I don't have female friends. My wife has female friends, and through her, we together might experience some level of friendship with her friends. But I don't have any female friends that my wife is not friends with. And she will not be friends with any guy that I am not friends with. You got to have some boundaries. Can I just, since we're on the topic, can I just share a couple things that I hate? You know what I hate? The term work wife. Work husband. Do you know what that is? Adultery. I'm serious. You might think, oh, it's not a big deal. It's just the girl that I get along with the most at work. No. If you're starting to think about it like she's some emotional support for you or he's some meaningful connection for you, you're getting some level of validation and affirmation from that relationship that's outside of your marriage, it's adultery and it's toxic, and you need to raise the standard and the safeguard. Have a boundary. We got boundaries. My wife and I go to bed. We go to bed at the same time every night. It doesn't matter if she's dead tired and I just had a Red Bull and I'm like, let's go. She's like, no, I don't stay up longer than we're in bed at the same time. That might seem weird to you, but it's a safeguard for us. If I'm tired and she's got energy, we climb into bed at the same time. It's a safeguard. I got safeguards on my devices. I got safeguards on our TVs. We got safeguards on our social media. Listen, unless you got something to hide, you should be okay with some safeguards. Unless you got something you're trying to get away with, having some standards shouldn't be an issue. And you got to have necessary safeguards in your life. Tithing is a safeguard. When you make the decision before you ever see a dime that I'm going to give 10% of what the Lord gives to me back to him, you are safeguarding your heart against pride. You are safeguarding your spirit against entitlement. You are safeguarding and presenting yourself in a posture, God, no matter what comes, I'm going to be grateful first. No matter what comes, I'm going to be thankful first. Serving is a safeguard. When you make the decision to say, I'm going to serve, I'm going to be relied on, I'm going to make a commitment, I'm going to serve on some worship, I'm going to serve on tech, I'm going to usher people, I'm going to hold a baby, I'm going to open a door, I'm going to clean a floor. What you're saying is I'm safeguarding myself against selfish ambition and living for myself. I'm going to build this into my life. It is a boundary. I'm going to serve because serving keeps me selfless. It's a safeguard. And Samson lowered his safeguards in his success. And I want to make sure that one day doesn't happen to you, and one day doesn't happen to your marriage, and one day doesn't happen to your career. We're trying to safeguard against having a long list of stories where it's like, where did they go? I don't know. One day we just stopped seeing them. What happened in their relationship? I don't know. One day they just stopped posting together on social. I don't know what happened. One day, let's protect against one day. Let's guard against one day. The problem for Samson is that after one day, it got worse. Because verse 4 said, sometime later, one day, sometime, he found love with a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went into her and said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued. Samson answered her, if anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, make sure they're wet, I'll become as weak as any other man. Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. With men hidden in the room, she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Samson does not guard his heart. Samson does not guard his eyes. Samson never learns how to control his desires. Now notice the question she asks, which is the question the Philistines were asking. Where does his great strength come from? Which tells me Samson's strength wasn't obvious. That tells me that we can forget the pictures of muscles on muscles, because if he was obviously strong, they wouldn't be asking, why are you so strong? If he looked like Schwarzenegger, they wouldn't be saying, where does your strength come from? Because it would obviously be coming from his body and his physique. I think he's probably a fairly regular looking guy. I think he probably doesn't have a lot of muscles and definition, which gives me hope because the Spirit of God can come on me at any time and I can have supernatural strength too. I'll be up on stage next year at the men's event bench pressing 225 like an animal. I'm just going to fast and pray beforehand. But see, the Philistines know this about Samson. He's strong in war, but he's weak in relationships. And so they don't need manpower to take him out. They don't need more soldiers to take him out because they're not going to fight him in the area of his strength. They're going to try and expose him in the area of his weakness. And the devil is never going to try to come at you in the area of your strength. He's going to try to expose you in the area of your greatest weakness. And Samson's weakness is women. He loves Delilah. How do you know if you're in a toxic relationship? How do you know if it's unhealthy? Well, he loves her, but she does not love him back. That's a real pain right there. I have felt that pain. I've been loved and not loved in return. Tash and I have been dating for like 2 weeks. Some of you have heard this story. You got sympathy for me. About 2 weeks. She's at work. United Rentals Trench Safety Division. Man, she looked good in that button-up United Rentals shirt and her steel-toe boots. Ooh. I called her about 8:30 in the morning. She's at work. I'm driving to work. I said, hey, I love you. 2 weeks in. You know what she did? Okay, click. That was the end of it. She could have said, I feel the same. This isn't a great time. She could have said, hey, thank you. Can we chat about this after? Nothing. Just, okay, click. No, it's not okay. I just put my heart out there. I said I loved you. When we finally got to talking about it, she's like, what were you thinking? We've been dating for 2 weeks, and I was at work. And I'm like, well, I do. And I still say it more. Every now and then, I got to double check. Do you actually love me, or are you just in it for my body? What are you trying to get out of me? Listen, I know Samson's pain. She's not into Samson. She's in it for the money. She gets bribed an exorbitant amount of money. She loves money. She doesn't love Samson. Why is Samson's standard for the relationship so low? See, one day you might find yourself with low safeguards and low standards, settling for something that is less than God's best and God's plan. He lowers his standards. Why do we love people that do not love us in return? What was Samson's issue? Was it unmet emotional needs? Remember his childhood? He's got this Nazirite vow. He can't cut his hair, can't drink alcohol, can't touch grapes, all these things. It's crazy. Imagine being in 5th grade. You're the only boy who's never had a haircut. No, I'm like, imagine being like you stand out. You're not normal. Your life isn't normal. Your mom does things at parent-teacher interview like, I just want you to know, I know he didn't do good in math, but he's anointed. Samson didn't grow up like a normal kid. We don't know what his environment was like at home. We don't know if his parents were engaged or emotionally absent. We do know that in adulthood, he was rejected for a season by his own people. And now he runs into a toxic relationship where he's not loved in return. Why? Because there's a lie that says, if I can make them love me, I can prove to me that I'm worthy of being loved. Maybe it was his low self-esteem. Maybe that's you today. You don't feel like you deserve to be loved, and so you lower your standards so somebody will love you, and you tell yourself it's okay to keep loving the guy who doesn't love you back and will not commit to you. And you tell yourself it's okay to keep loving the person who will not pursue you, which, by the way, ladies, if you're not being pursued, you're not being loved. You should be pursued. And that goes for the married women too. Men, keep pursuing your wife. Don't stop pursuing her, initiating, being intentional. Why did Samson fall for this? Why did Samson end up in this relationship? Why do we end up in these types of relationships? The ones that we love them, but they can't give us the time of day. Why are you still caught up on them? And it's not just a people problem. Because we love money, and it will not love us back. People love popularity, and it won't love you back. You can love getting clicks, likes, shares, and it will not love you back. You can love possessions, and they will never love you back. And some of you are not in an abusive relationship with another person. You're in an unloving relationship with a material thing that will not love you back. You think it will make you feel better the more of it you have, but you are grinding yourself into the ground, burning yourself out, chasing a feeling you will never receive from that thing. When you love something that doesn't love you back, it blinds you, binds you, and burns you out. She will not love him back. She freaks out. You made a fool of me, Samson. It's like, well, why won't you tell me the secret? Why did you lie to me? And then Samson, in his weakness, he's like, baby, I love you so much. Says, why don't you just get them to tie me up with new ropes? And she's like, okay. She's crazy, everybody. Like, she's not even hiding how crazy she is. She's going for it. She's like, okay, get some new ropes. When you go to sleep, I'll tie you up. Ties him up. He breaks free again. Then she gets up again. She's like, Samson, what are you doing? You're making me look foolish. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, baby. I love you so much. It's like, Sammy, what does it take? So you just have to take my hair and weave it into a loom. And if you do that, I'll just be like any other man. Know this, the enemy wants you to be like any other person. That's part of the plan of the enemy, is to rob you of your unique calling, anointing, purpose, and design. But God has made everybody in this room totally unique. He's got an individual plan for you. You are a one of one. You're not like everybody else, but the devil wants you to want to be like everybody else. And Samson gives in again, and she weaves his hair in, and things are getting crazy. And what's wild about it is every time he goes back to Delilah, he doesn't take the opportunity to escape. He doesn't check and be like, man, she's crazy, I gotta leave. He keeps giving himself up to her, getting more and more vulnerable with her, and believing the lie, well, I can break out again this time. And he breaks out of the bowstring, and he breaks out of the rope, and he breaks out of the loom, and he continues to break out. This is a lie. I can break this habit when I want to. I'm strong enough to stop this when I want to. So I can quit this whenever I want to quit this. And listen, that might be true until it's not. And eventually for Samson, it wasn't. And instead of fleeing from sin, now check this. This is the definition of Delilah. You want to know what her name means? It means to flirt with the night. To flirt with the dark, to get close to it, to try it. Instead of fleeing from sin, Samson is flirting with sin. Instead of fleeing from temptation, instead of fleeing from sin, he keeps getting closer and closer and closer to Delilah, where finally he's letting her do something with his hair, but it's not quite cutting it, but he's so close. How much can I get away with? Whoa, how close can I get without losing my strength? How close can I get and still break free? And the problem is, he got so close that the text says in verse 16 that he was sick to death. of her nagging and the constant repetition and the pattern. And he finally just said, go ahead, shave my head. That's the secret. I'll have no strength. I'll just be like every other man. And the real tragedy of the story is that he awoke, it says in verse 20, from his sleep, his head now shaved, and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Oh, it works till it doesn't. It doesn't catch up with you until it does. It doesn't destroy your marriage until it destroys your marriage. It doesn't get at your sanity and your emotional health until one day he ripped out his eyes, bound him up, and burned him out. His strength left him. The Lord left him. Samson tried to cope like he had always coped. He tried to get free like he'd always gotten free, but this final time, it was different. He could not go forward. He's blind, bound, and burnt out. And maybe you're here today and you feel like your strength has left you too. Maybe you're here today and you can identify you don't have vision for the future. You can't see what's next. You can't imagine a change to your circumstance. I can't imagine that prayer ever getting answered. I can't imagine that miracle ever happening. Maybe you feel bound up. Maybe you feel stuck. Maybe you feel trapped. Maybe you're here saying, man, what? I never thought I'd be here one day. And you ask what many people ask, what I believe Samson probably asked at some point, where do I go from here? I'm exhausted. It's the same thing over and over. I'm trapped. I can't see. I have no idea how to get out. Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? Verse 22, but the hair on his head began to grow again. After it had been shaved, it began to grow again. And it says the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon their God and to celebrate, saying, our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands. They bring Samson out in verse 25, says, when they were in high spirits, they shouted, bring out Samson to entertain us. So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. And when they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, put me where I can feel the pillars. Remember, he's blind, he can't see. That support the temple so that I may lean against them. The temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there. And on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson reached towards the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on one, his left hand on the other. Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. Then he pushed with all of his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus, he killed many more when he died than when he lived. Maybe today you feel like your strength has left you too. Maybe today you're in a situation similar to what Samson was in. Be encouraged. His hair grew back. Be encouraged. Your strength can grow back. Be encouraged. He had given up his strength, but it would return. It began to grow. And if you're in that place today, there are decisions that you can make to grow. I know we like to say, man, I'm in a comeback season. I'm ready for a comeback. I don't think we need to be looking for a comeback. I think we need to be looking for a grow back. God, how can I grow from this? How can I grow out of this? How will you develop me and strengthen me and shape me and mold me? God, how do I grow from here? It's time to start asking a new question. Not, God, where do I go? I have no options. I don't know what's in front of me. To God, how do I grow? And what does Samson do to grow? He says to the servant, I got to feel the pillars. I need to get around the pillars. I got to get around something stable so I can lean against them. Can I ask you today, what are you leaning on? What are your pillars? Because a bank account and success and opinions of others and your desires are not adequate pillars in your life. They will not give you the support you need. But Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on what you understand to be good or the world understands to be good. Not on my own understanding, but lean in all my ways. Submit to him and he will make my paths straight. You got to get around some stability. You got to get around some good pillars. God, I'm going to lean on you. God, I'm going to lean on good people. I'm going to get some healthy relationships in my circle so that I can lean on them and grow from them. God, I'm going to get around some people that encourage me when I'm feeling down. I'm going to get around an EC group so I get prayed for when I'm feeling frustrated. You've got to get around some stability. Get around some stable people. Get around the right pillars. And then he prays, Sovereign Lord, remember me. Strengthen me just once more. You might have got so tired and so worn out and so blind, you don't even feel like you can muster that simple prayer. God, strengthen me one more time. God, I didn't think I'd make it to Sunday. God, I don't know if Monday's a possibility if you don't strengthen me one more time. God, would you strengthen me one more time? What if that became a daily practice for us? Stability and submission. God, I need to be around people who will strengthen me. And God, just one more time. God, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but God, I know that you can help strength come out of my weakness. God, I don't know what to expect, but would you strengthen me one more time? God, would you give me the strength to endure another day, the strength to live through another week, another month. God, give me the strength. God, I'm yours. And with that posture, God did more in a moment than all of Samson's life combined up to that point. More with a heart that said, God, I want to be stable. I'm going to lean on you. More with the heart that said, God, use me. God, I just need a little more strength. More with that heart in one moment. And here's what's crazy. And actually, would you stand with me? Nobody leave. Both campuses, I want you to stand, and I'm going to finish with this. Nobody leave, because I know God's speaking to people's hearts right now. I know that there are people that you are at the end of your rope. You're not sure how you're going to move forward. Nobody leave in the Southwest. Nobody leave here. It's really easy to be frustrated with Samson. Samson, you idiot. Why did you keep going back to that foolish woman? Why did you keep going back to that woman who pushed you away and betrayed you and backstabbed you? Samson, why would you keep going back and loving her when she didn't love you in return? But if you're going to say that about Samson, you also have to say it about God. Because the truth is that God kept going back to Samson even though he rejected him. And the truth is that you wouldn't be here if God didn't keep going back to you after you had pushed him away. And God has kept coming back to me and my mistakes and my failure and my sin and my shortcoming. Man, I'm thankful for a God that in my weakest moment says, hey, listen, I know you never thought you'd be here, but we can grow from here. And you need to know today that you have a heavenly Father who loves you even though you didn't love him, and who's for you even though you weren't for him, and who's got you even though there have been moments when you didn't have him. You are only here because of the outpouring of the unconditional, irrational, inconceivable love of a heavenly Father on flawed creation, and you and I, like Samson, have the opportunity to grow from here. Your best days are still in front of you because we have a good God who loves us. And so with your heads bowed and your eyes closed, Jesus, I pray right now for every person who feels like they're blind, bound, and burnt out. There's struggle in the room. There's disappointment in the room. There's grief in the room. God, thank you that right now you've got strength for one more day. God, one more time, would you give strength? God, one more time, would you give the courage to pray the prayer? God, one more time, would you give strength to lift a hand in worship? God, one more time, would you give strength to be vulnerable and say, I just need somebody around me to help keep me stable in this season. God, one more time. God, thank you that you are the strength we need every day.